Okay, Sean, give us the news.
Hi guys, thank you for joining us again, and we are going to give you an update on the news and what's been happening in this world, guys. Just before we start, please don't forget to like and subscribe to our page. Really helps us out when you do that, guys, okay? So today we're going to be talking about what's been happening previously, and I'm going to give you my predictions of what's going to happen in the world up until November. Just as a backdrop to this and kind of a segue, I'm going to talk about the recent developments that the Germans have now said that there's British Special Forces operating in Ukraine. I'm going to tell you what that means, but I'm going to come on to that at the end as it's not really part of the talk. So as as a backdrop to this video now, the ship that was sank by the Houthis in the Red Sea, that's now sank, and the Houthis have now been vowed to continue to target other British ships. Now, this is, a direct spit in the face of the naval forces that are there, and it basically says that the naval forces and the naval strikes are just not working. This is also more evidence of the rise of the BRICS nations and how ultimately this is the only way that this can end is in a world war, and that is where we're going, guys, okay? So the UK at the moment have scrapped, they've scrapped 30 of their aircraft because we're British and we think, we're just about to fight a war, so let's get rid of 30 of our aircraft, Makes it a little bit more taxing for ourselves, I guess. Absolutely crazy, I've no idea why that's happening. Absolutely insane that we would do that. So what's going to happen for the rest of this, well, until the US elections? So what I see happening is after the Russian election, I see the conflict in Ukraine really escalating to a state where the likes that we've not seen before. Now, the reason I'm saying this is because Ukraine now is in a worse position than when this conflict started. So what do I mean by that? Well, they don't have as many men. They've lost 31,000 soldiers. Now, can you imagine what effect that's having on, just on that one, on their military? If that was the British military, our military would be gone. And don't forget, with that 31,000, normally you get around 7 people who have life-changing injuries for every one death. So for every one death, you get 7 people missing an arm, missing a leg, brain damage, terrible injuries. So that's the state of, Ukraine. Ukraine can't produce its own ammunition. It has to rely heavily on the West and Europe. So there isn't enough ammunition to resupply and replenish the Ukrainians. All these factories now, they're on full production. And a lot of countries are just going into them and saying, listen, guys, I will buy everything you can produce for the next 2 years and I'll pay you cash up front. So these factories are at full, they're at full production. Now, if you go over to the Russian side, look how big Russia is. It's a totalitarian state. So the system is set up there so that they can keep producing these systems and they can produce them a lot quicker. They can because the Russians don't have, they don't have the best, the most precise, the most expensive, the best circuit boards, the best, everything. All that good stuff that's the best, it takes time. Whereas the Russians, they're using low quality materials that can be sourced locally, and that's key there, guys, okay? They can source all their materials for their munitions locally. So that's kind of the industrial hub. When this conflict started, Russia had none of that set up. Now they've got it all set up and they can keep producing, they can keep pushing forwards, and they can keep building stuff, and their war economy has got, it's grown from strength to strength. And these sanctions that we put on the Russians, I don't see, I don't really see how it's affecting them. They've just made an announcement, the Russians, that they are stopping all, I think it's all hydrocarbons exports, but certainly all gas exports. What does that mean? Well, a lot of people are saying that they're doing it because they need it for their own military or X, Y, and Z. The reality is we don't know, but if the Russians were hurting financially, they wouldn't be stopping one of their biggest incomes. I don't know, guys. You tell me what you think in the comments, all right? But that, you know, these things are key. The Russian military industrial complex is at full force, whereas the Ukrainian military industrial complex is non-existent, and the rest of Europe that's propping Ukraine up, you know, we're struggling over red tape, and a lot of countries are still in denial. That said, you know, more countries now are considering and talking about putting their own troops into Ukraine. I think this will happen at some point. And you know, they will be initially in there as peacekeepers, or as, you know, non-military aid or non-combatants. Don't forget, guys, okay, there's something called mission creep, mission slip. You go in there on a training mission, but where does that training mission end? Are you training recruits who can't use a rifle, or are you training special forces and you're going out on the ground with them, mentoring them? You know, when you say training mission, the lines can be very blurred. So, sorry, I'm digressing. So, what's going to happen? Big things that are going to happen before the US election. Like I said, guys, you know, after the Russian election, there's going to be a huge push in Ukraine, and worst case scenario, the Russians could push up to the Dnipro. I don't see them going any further than the Dnipro. The Dnipro is a natural barrier. It's hard to get over water. You know, there's only so many crossing points, and they're easily defendable. And not only are they defendable, they can be taken down. As well, from the north, we run the risk of the Belarusians coming down into Ukraine and making a land grab to Zhytomyr. Also, from Belarus to the west of Belarus, there's the Suwalki Gap, or the Suwalki Corridor. I don't, you know, some people call it different. Which is basically 60 miles that links Belarus to Kaliningrad. At some point, the Belarusians could make a land grab to, you know, to link Kaliningrad to Belarus to Russia, to give Russia that straight run into the Baltics. And then obviously you've got to the southwest of Ukraine, you've got the region of Transnistria. I don't think there's no strategic value in Transnistria, but there's political value. There's political clout by being able to organize a coup, being able to get the Transnistrians to, you know, just start some sort of protest that then turn into riots, and then that gives Putin more clout to say, listen, you know, these guys want to be, these guys want to be Russian. So that's it, guys, in a nutshell, what's going to happen. You know, big things are going to happen in Ukraine over the next few months. Very dangerous times we're living in, and with the information that we've got that Western troops are now going to be potentially entering Ukraine, I really fear that we could have this war start by absolute accident. Now, it came out in the news about the Germans have now been claiming that they're British special forces in Ukraine. What does this mean? Absolutely nothing, guys. Whether it's true or whether it's not true, it doesn't matter, because this conflict is not a special forces conflict, okay? There's going to be no helicopter raids behind enemy lines. There's going to be no, you know, deep behind enemy lines stuff, and, you know, all the sneaky stuff where, like in the Gulf War in Afghanistan, in the invasion of Iraq, where you saw British Special Forces, you saw American Special Forces, you know, doing some really good surgical strikes and high value target acquisition. That's not going to happen in this conflict, guys, okay? This is going to be a heavy war with heavy machinery. So what people should be focusing on is not the few guys, if they are in there, running around doing whatever. We need to be focusing on heavy machinery, heavy kit and equipment that's moving around from country to country. Like I said before, guys, this exercise Steadfast Defender, what's going to be key is when this exercise is over, where does all the logistics go? Is it going to stay in Poland? Yes. Or are they going to bring that back? If it stays in Poland, you know why, guys, all right? It takes time to put this infrastructure in place. And that is the reason for exercise Steadfast Defender. And don't forget, I think one thing, and I've just thought of it now, I think one thing that not many people are even considering when they say that this is the biggest exercise in 30 years or whatever it is, not only is it the biggest exercise in 30 years, but I don't think that there's ever been an exercise, any military exercise, ran so close to a country that's actually at war. Now think about that, guys. Remember, think about the optics from the Russian side. You know, this war could potentially start by accident. Guys, thank you for watching so much. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Remember, guys, we've got 2 platforms now, so make sure you give them both a like, and I'll see you next time.